Um, the day we find ourselves in is very special. Today is Lag BaOmer, the holiday that commemorates the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who told us that we should celebrate his life. Righteous people live lives that are celebrated at the end. And the end of the deaths of the students of the great Rabbi Akiva, 2,000 years ago. And the Talmud teaches us that they passed away because lo nahogu kavod zelazeh. They did not show proper respect and honor to each other. There wasn't enough of that love and unity and respect together. So Rav Jack and I decided that today would be a good time to dive into this topic of loving one another, caring for one another, but how far we're supposed to go with that. How can we make it real and sustainable? Rav Jack, excited?
I'm very excited. Rav Daniel, I think this is the beginning of lots of collaboration. It's a pleasure. This past week, just getting this started, thinking about it together has been great, and I'm excited to continue this conversation right now.
I love it. I love it. And as am I love how we're coming from, all of us come from different perspectives, and we're able to blend it together to none of us have the full answer, but together we can create a beautiful tapestry, which we'll try to do tonight. I'm going to try to frame the ideal, as you called it, the vision of what would Ahavat Yisrael, love of one another, look like in an ideal form. What does Judaism ask of us? And Rav Jack's going to help bring us into how can we make that into a tangible reality? How can we make this practical in our lives? And then we'll come together at the end to see in 2020, with the world we live in and the lives we live, how can we balance this love for others that's expected of us and self-care at the same time, to make sure that we're sane and happy by the end of it. So the first question we could ask is, why should we care about each other at all? Why isn't maybe life just about my survival and my success and that's it? Wasn't it Cain at the beginning of the Torah, Cain, who said, am I my brother's keeper? Am I supposed to take care of one another? And yet the holy Baal Shem Tov many years later said that love of another is the portal, the gateway to love of God. You can't start religion, you can't start spiritual growth without that. That is the first step into the courtyards of living a true divine spiritual life. So we're also told that the second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. So clearly this is an integral aspect of Jewish life. I want to begin 3,300 years ago with probably the most famous saying we have about treating each other. It says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," you should love another as you love yourself. Pretty lofty, pretty high, to love someone like you love yourself. So we're going to dive into what that means. And later on, about 2,000 years ago, Hillel, the great Hillel, said, he made it a little more tangible. He said, what is hateful to you, don't do to another. The rest is commentary. A convert, somebody wanted to convert, asked him, and that's what he said. That's the whole Judaism. That's the whole Torah. And that seems pretty basic, to be honest with you. The golden rule, don't do to someone what you don't want done to yourself. It seems kind of lackluster. And to say that that's the entire Torah seems to be a bit much, from first glance. So what I love to do is to dive into the mystical realms of what's really going on here. What did Hillel mean? Did he mean it was just that? So the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, he wrote a book on mitzvot called Derech Mitzvotecha, and he discusses this mitzvah, and he says that when Hillel said that what is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else, he describes a beautiful analogy. He says, when I make a mistake, or when any of us makes a mistake, do we immediately berate ourselves and say that we're just bad people? No, most likely we say, you know what, I had a tough day, I'm stressed, that person really knows how to push my buttons, this is not who I am, this does not define who I am, this is just a momentary lapse. But when we see someone else make a mistake, someone else have a flaw, do we do the same thing? Often we'll kind of define the person by that flaw. We'll say, you know what, I better steer clear of that person. Maybe that's just who they are. We don't have that. And why is that? Because we have an overwhelm of essential self-love to who we are. We might not notice it all the time, but we know we're good deep down. We're trying our best, right? But with others, we don't have that deep knowledge of who they are. We don't see beneath the surface. So we can stop at that level. Now, what happens if someone else does that to us? What if someone else looks at us and says, oh, why'd you do that thing? You're bad. That would hurt a lot, right? Because it would hurt so much that they would think that that's completely who I am. That's not just an aberration. So when Hillel said, what is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else, according to Chassidus, it means that which is hateful to you, if somebody were to define you by a mistake and not look at the core of who you are, the essence of who you are, that's hateful to you. Don't do that to somebody else. Don't look at someone else and define them by the thing. Try and work throughout your life on developing and cultivating an essential love for others to such an extent that when you see what they do, it's not turning a blind eye, but you see past it. You have a love for them that you've proactively worked on. And when you look at them with that kind eye, you're able to cover over that flaw. So the question remains, why did Hillel say that's the entire Torah? I mean, Rav Jack, we know that Torah, half of it's between man and man. But us and God, is Hillel just saying, don't worry about that? So according to Kabbalah, every mitzvah we do, all the Torah we learn, everything we're trying to do is to miyachid kudsha b'richa l'shchinte, which means to connect the masculine and feminine expression of God, which basically means to unite God and us. That's the goal. And even though every mitzvah we do accomplishes another strand of that, another element of that, the sages say that loving each other, having unity, causes that to the utmost degree. It is an all-encompassing mitzvah. And that's what he means that that's the entire Torah. He takes it a step further and says, if you don't see flaws in others, then God too does not see flaws in us and is able to miyachid, to connect with us. When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad, and to unite ourselves in that one, that is able to occur when we're able to get past the superficial layer. And he also describes an idea of how we're all encompassed in one soul. Adam, the first human, which was made up of Adam and Eve, we were all part of this one being. And just like you see somebody who's maybe more emotional, like a heart, you could say they're a heart person, or someone's more intellectual, someone's more hand person, more action-oriented. We're all rooted in a different aspect of Adam, in the primordial soul. And when we're unified, it's like a body that's unified. If you cut off a finger, the head's going to feel it. Everyone's going to feel it. If you have a blood clot between veins, we're all inter-included in each other. We're all interconnected spiritually. It's not like one goes up and the other doesn't. We're all connected. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who today is his passing, he says a story in the Talmud that when he said, imagine two people on a boat, and someone digs a hole under the boat, and the water starts to fill the ship. And the other passenger says, what are you doing? And the guy says, what do you care? It's my seat. What do you care that I'm digging a hole? And, the idea is what we do is we affect each other. We feel it. I don't know about you, but some days when I feel down, I wonder, is it me just feeling down, or am I connected and feeling what's going on in the world around me, and vice versa? When we feel elevated and uplifted, maybe there's something going on in the world around us. I'm sure during this COVID-19, we felt that certain days that are feeling negative or not. And this is interestingly why the generation of Noah was destroyed in a flood. And yet the very next generation that was equally bad, there was Tower of Babel. They tried to build a tower and fight God. They just got their languages mixed up. They say because God said you're unified. You're rebelling against me, but you're unified in it. Unity amongst us is crucial. I just want to close off this initial section with a story or two that means a lot to me. Rabbi Shmuel Kaplan, he's a rabbi in Maryland. And he says that one time there was a teenage girl in his community that was writing letters to the Lubavitcher Rebbe asking advice, and they went back and forth. And one time she said, she was exasperated. She said, you don't know how I feel. You could never know how I feel. And the Rebbe said, one day, God willing, you'll get married and you'll have a child. And when you have that child will have teething. And when that child cries out from that teething, you as a mother will feel that pain like it's your own pain. And he said, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Meaning, those who have elevated themselves and have worked, we're not necessarily on that level, but again, we're talking about what we're shooting for. You feel others' pain. It's not just a selfish life of my own. And it's obviously, that's an intense life, and we have to discuss what that means, to feel and be sensitive to what everyone's going through. That can also be draining. But the Arizal says that before we pray every morning, we say, Hareini mekabel alai mitzvah taseh. If you go to his gravesite in Tzfat, it's on his tombstone. The greatest mystic, he doesn't put Kabbalah, he says, every day take upon yourself, I'm going to love others like I love myself. That is the gateway. And the Baal Shem Tov says that true love of one is to love what they love. So if God loves his children, by loving God's children, that is showing true love of God. And you ask any parents, they prefer you to be rude to them but kind to their children than vice versa, to be kind to them but to treat their children in a negative way. And that's what God asks of us, as tough as it can be. And the final story, and I'm going to pass the mic to my good friend here, is they say that there were three types of love of fellow Jews by the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, and Reb Zusha. And they say Reb Zusha did not see bad in others. He was incapable of seeing bad. You could have done something awful in front of him, he wouldn't notice it. Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, it says he saw bad, but he was able to turn it to the good. So, for example, if he saw a Jew putting on tefillin, famous story, putting on tefillin while he greased his wheels, he said, how amazing, God, is it that this person is able, while he does mundane stuff, to connect to you. By the way, that's not so different to us on our, we're on our iPhone in the middle of Baruch Shamar over there. While we're praying, you could look at it one of two ways. Look how low it is, or it's kind of amazing in 2020 when there's so much distraction, we're able to daven and pray to God. So we can do what Rabbi Levi Yitzchak did in our own way too. But what I most connect with is the final view, which was the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, it says, saw the bad in others, and he didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't paint it over. He saw the bad, but he loved them anyways. And I think that's tying back to what we started with, which is it's not ignoring it, but it's working to cultivate what I see is not the essential definition of this person that I'm seeing. And disclaimer, we're not talking about toxic situations. We'll get into that later. Most times, the people that I'm seeing, let me not stop at the surface layer. Let me go beneath the surface and connect to their soul, the beauty and the diamond that's shining within. And sorry, Jack, last one. The Rebbe would give out dollars every Sunday. And the famous story goes that this elderly woman said, how do you stand for 8 hours? You're 92. This is ridiculous. And he said, you don't get tired counting diamonds. If you have a wad of cash or a bunch of diamonds, you can do it all day. And the Rebbe saw a holy person can see that beneath all the layers that we show and all the rudeness on the subway and all that, there's something more beyond it.
Dan, thanks for sharing that. I just feel like so many gems. I kind of want to speed through what I want to say so we could talk about, make a conversation. But I'll just start with one thing that you said that I think is a good starting point, a segue, which is that on the Arizal's kever, on his tomb, it says, I accept upon myself the mitzvah of loving my fellow person as I love myself. Which according to him in his Siddur is something we're supposed to say, like you said, every day. I was just thinking about that. It's an amazing, I think, gateway into this conversation for me is thinking about that every day you're supposed to accept upon yourself the obligation to love fellow person as you love yourself, which really tells you something about what mitzvot are. Mitzvot are exercises, in a sense. It's not about being at a certain state. Mitzvot apply to every person in the society, from a 13-year-old boy who just started keeping mitzvot to the highest scholars and righteous people in that society. They're all obligated in the mitzvah, which means by definition that the mitzvah is delineating certain behaviors that point you in a certain direction. And I think the fact that the Arizal said every day we have to accept upon ourselves to love our fellow person, we love ourselves, it means it's something that you have to continually accept. It's not a switch in the brain that I switch it and all of a sudden I see that I'm one with everyone. I see that I'm just another limb on this giant organism. It would be beautiful if that was their case. But where I want to bring the conversation, then we'll, between the two of us, the voltage between the ideal and the real, we'll have a powerful conversation and learn a lot. But there has to be a way for me to move towards that ideal, because I definitely can't jump into it. And if I try to, I could think a few things. I could think, number one, I could think the Torah is cute but naive. That the Torah is like very lofty ideals, but it's not. It's like it's meant for angels or righteous people who I don't really relate to. Let's say personally, I feel distant from. Or I could be naive myself and say, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna love everyone like I love myself. And then before I know it, I give out all the cash I have in my wallet, and then I have no money for lunch, and then I'm hungry, and then I'm spiteful for, how come I gave out all my money? Like, now I'm hungry. Now I need to panhandle, right? And then it's like, and then there's like anger, like resentment. Or maybe I could, the opposite, I disappointed at myself. Like, I can't believe it. I start off my day wanting to love everyone like I love myself, and I failed at it. Like, I'm such a failure, right? So this is, I think, a larger question in Judaism and in all spiritual pursuits, which is that there's really three moving parts. In any growth, there has to be an ideal, and that ideal can be the purest, the most refined ideal, and as it should be, right? You got to shoot for the stars. But if I only have the ideal, but I have no awareness of where I'm at, then it's naive. Then there's the other thing. It's like, I don't forget the ideals. Ideals, I shmios, right? This is me. This is how I am. I'm a selfish guy. I was born that way. Who are you to tell me otherwise, right? And then obviously that's not a very motivating picture of life either, because you're just going to stay put. So you have your ideal, and then you have to have your sense of your real. Where are you at? Where are your emotions right now? Where's your bodily limitations, your financial limitations, right? Where are you? And then you have to have the ideal, and then you have to figure out, okay, what's the process? What are the vehicles that are going to move me day by day towards that ideal? And in many ways, I think that's what this period is. This period of time between Pesach and Shavuot. Pesach is freedom. Shavuot is we're receiving the big vision of God. And in between, we count day by day. It's a very simple mitzvah. Just today is, right? I can't count because I haven't counted yet tonight. But you say today is the blank day of the Omer, right? You count day by day, step by step. And that's this beautiful vision of moving towards the ideal, but in a day by day. So what does that look like? So it's interesting to look at that. I think Rabbi articulated the Chassidus, which comes from the word chesed, the essential love, the essential energy of the mitzvah, which is of course the ideal. Of course the ideal is to strive to be like Reb Zusha, Reb Levi Yitzchak, or the Baal Shem Tov. You pick your tzaddik, right? Any one of those three will do great as an ideal. But of course you can't jump into that. So what's the halachic definition of the mitzvah? So if you look at the Rambam in his Code of Jewish Law, Maimonides, so he codifies it that a person needs to take care of people's needs when those needs come up in the way that he would take care of his own, so to speak. So in other words, if the opportunity comes to speak about someone else, you should speak about them in the most glowing way, the way you would want someone to speak about you. If you see someone's headlights are on, right, outside, you would want someone to let you know that your headlights are on, right? So you should go and tell them. It happens to be that's another mitzvah of not letting someone lose money or lose resources. But of course, it's connected to caring about someone else the way. But the same person who says, Rabbi Akiva, who says that loving your fellows, you love yourself, is the greatest, most overarching principle of the Torah. He's the same person who famously says that if you have two people wandering in the desert and only one of them has a bottle of water, where that bottle of water is only sufficient for one of them to reach civilization, then that person does not have to share the water. And he learns it from a verse in the Torah that it's talking about, when it's talking about loans. When do you have an obligation to give out a loan? And he says you have an obligation to give out a loan insofar as your brother can live with you. But if you're not going to have the resources to live yourself, right? If you're going to give your money to him and then you're going to need the loan, it can't work that way. So there's got to be a way to see how these ideals fit with this intuitive resistance we have. A resistance we have is, I can't take care of everybody's needs. If I take care of everybody's needs, how am I going to take care of myself? In fact, the mitzvah, the verse that you quoted indicates that. It says, love your fellow as you love yourself, right? So there has to be a self involved, right? I have to take care of myself. And what about when those two are at odds? I'll share a story, and then I think we've said enough that we can go back and forth more naturally. But I remember, I don't know why this particular story is so vivid. It's not a very exciting story. It's not there are no big tzaddikim in the story. It's just a little vignette. I remember when my oldest daughter was born. You're never really prepared for your first kid, and we didn't have enough diapers. We didn't have any diapers, I think, actually. We had no diapers. They gave us a couple diapers at the hospital, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're home now. We have no diapers. So I remember running to the pharmacy. It was in Jerusalem, and I got to the pharmacy at 10:01, and it closed at 10. And I remember having this whole interaction with this girl who was working there. I was like, please, we had a baby. I need diapers, right? And she's like, no. And she's like, that. It's like, please, it's 1 minute. I just need to go. Okay. I remember she let me in. With a huff and a puff, she let me in. And while I was there, I need to get wipies. I need a diaper, I need wipes. And she was grumbling. She was very upset, right? She did me a favor, but then she was grumbling. And she kind of like rung me up, kind of grumbling, and then didn't say goodbye, and I left. And I was left with this feeling of like, it's like this girl seemed to have been disappointed many times from having helped people. It's like she kind of like helped people and she felt like gotten taken advantage of. Like she went out on a limb for me. She let me in. I told her it'd be 1 minute. I told her I needed diapers. I got diapers and wipies. And that really put her out, whatever it was, right? I'm sure she had a long day, right? But I was more thinking about her, like her attitude is like, every time I help people, they do this to me, And I think that comes back to this dynamic of how do we balance ourselves? How can Rabbi Akiva say, on the one hand, love your fellows, you love yourself, it's the most important principle of the Torah, and on the other hand says, look, you got to take care of yourself. If you only have one bottle, then it's tragic, but you have to drink it. You have to take care of yourself before you take care of someone else. How can those coexist? And I think on these two sides, I think there's enough voltage created between the ideal and the real that I think we're gonna have a very interesting conversation.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. That was very well put and really brought it down. And that's the goal, right? The goal is to bring down the ideal into our daily lives. Right. And the time we're in now, these 7 weeks, where we count 7 divine traits within us, 7 character traits we have within. There's not just, the first one's chesed, loving and giving. If it ended there, okay, so that's got to be your whole life. Clearly, we're asked to have a holistic view of how we live our lives, right? Right across from kindness is restraint, is discipline. We have to marry the two through Tiferet. We have to have harmony between giving, but giving in a way that is channeled, in a way that, first of all, giving too much, by the way, hugging people nonstop, giving them no space or room to grow on their own, it's not ideal either. So it's a healthy engine, so to speak. Something, it has to have a good balance and an equilibrium to go. When I found myself giving nonstop, without any limitation, I found that it wasn't a matter of being bad for me. It's actually bad for others also, because I don't have the energy to give to those that are able to receive it and maybe listen to the help I'm giving them and channel it. When you're giving to someone who, let's say, needs, and doesn't actually take it in a way that is constructive but can drain you. We all have in our lives situations like that. And I think it's a matter of truth, right? What's the third? I'm always going Kabbalistic, but the first is kindness and giving. The second divine trait we have is givur, is discipline, is restraint. It's the opposite, Abraham and Isaac. The third is Tiferet. And Tiferet is known as harmony and balancing of the two and all of that, but it's also called truth. And I think that's what we're getting at here, between Rabbi Akiva saying, love a fellow like you love yourself, and then if you only have enough water for one, maybe we could say emotionally, if you only have enough in energy emotionally, maybe take care of yourself first, and then you can give to others. Love yourself so you can overflow it to those around you. Truth is found in the ability to balance our giving and our holding back, so that we could do it for long hauls. And this applies to so many areas, even love of God. You meet a Baal Tshuva. I was one of those on fire for God. And so many of my, not so many, but some of my friends and myself, you can get burnt out because you overflow the engine that is the mind and the body with your soul. And even the soul and body balance, there has to be this equilibrium. So clearly when it comes to love and giving and then taking care of our own self, there has to be ability to balance the two, I think, for sure.
Right. I'm just thinking of ways to like this is something I've been thinking about since we said we're going to do this talk. How do you articulate that balance? Because balance itself, as you mentioned, it's one of the sfirot. It's its own entity, balance. It's not that like there's love and there's strength and discipline and we got to find, we got to squeeze in somewhere in between. There's a separate dimension called balance, harmony. So over here, I think if you don't have that, there's a kind of misconception, which is, okay, Rabbi Kiva says you got to really love people, but he also says you got to take care of yourself. So what should you do? You should kind of love people. That's like in the middle, right? Which is, I think, kind of intuitively the way most people kind of look at it. I can't love people too much. There's only so many hours in the day, and I got to take care of myself, and I got to take care of my family. And so I like people a lot. I like people a lot. I think that's a pretty moderate, balanced view. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying two separate things, and we have to figure out a way. Where's the truth? How do we articulate how those two fit together? You have to somehow love people the way you love yourself in a certain sense. That has to be true. And it has to also be true that if you only have limited resources in there, you only have enough for yourself, you should take for yourself, and you're not violating love your fellow like you love yourself. There has to be a harmony between them.
I met Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg once, the Kabbalist from Israel, visiting Los Angeles. I was young, a while ago. And he talked about loving another person like you love yourself. And I said, I was very into politics, and I mentioned some in Israel that were making it tough on the government. It was early 2000s, rough time. And he said, read chapter 32 of Tanya. And it took me a while to resonate with it, because all the Alter Rebbe says is that the more you de-emphasize your physicality and the more you emphasize your soul, automatically you'll come to love each other. You won't see the limitations. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about, when we say self-care or I care for someone else, it's you're caring for your soul. That person is a precious soul as well. And I think when we talk about self-care in my head, I think it's more than just a bubble bath and Netflix. I think the ability to, that's good too, but the ability to feed your soul, because what you started with this conversation with was that you were talking about it's a daily thing. Accept upon yourself daily. I think this is all a work in progress, and the more we slowly learn more Torah and work on our traits and start to become just more sensitive people, both to others and to our own needs, and refine that more and more, and it'll be different for every person, I think we can just start to clarify more what matters. And what I mean by this is this: if you're somebody who is has worked on yourself and you become a more spiritual person, I think often giving for someone or giving to someone or caring for them not only does it not hurt you or detract from your mental state or your emotional worry, you actually feel the most fulfilled ever. Giving is the most fulfilling, selfish thing ever when you really think about it, because you're engaged in the purpose of what we're here for to begin with. It's if we're here for self-preservation and and our own success in that way, then we'll be happy when we just make a lot of money and we do that stuff. But we all know we're able to transcend ourselves and do more, and we feel we're aligned with our purpose and our truth. I think to each their own. Someone that might be volunteering in an orphanage in India for months, which for me might be a very difficult thing to do. For you and I, it could be teaching a class, or I think the healthy way, find your way of doing it. But the more, I think maybe that's what Tiferet is. It's like focus on your truth and how you can actualize your purpose on this earth. And that, by definition, has to be going beyond yourself sometimes. And when you're not going beyond yourself and you're doing self-care and you're building yourself up and taking time to learn and taking time to to maybe do some meditation and relax a bit so that you're able to balance, I think it's all part of the truth. It's all part of truth. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai learned Torah all day long. Rabbi Akiva more worked with the community. They had different roles, but in their own role, they were bettering the world in their way. So this is a stream of thought to what you said. Your question still remains. I think, understanding who we are, this purpose, as well as the fact that we're an animal soul and godly soul, means that automatically our animal soul and body are going to want to just take care of ourselves and be comfortable. And our divine soul is going to want to transcend, do for others, be selfless. And we have to find a way to somehow teach the animal soul and body that it's good for you too to be selfless. It's not, you're not going to hurt. You're not going to lose out as much as you think.
Mm-hmm. I just connected two things that you said. Something you said like a while back that I loved. That you said that Rav Levi Yitzchak would see a guy who was wearing tefillin while he was doing something technical and mundane, and instead of saying, "How could you wear tefillin while you do this mundane thing?" he said, "Wow, it's an amazing thing that while you're doing this really mundane thing, you're fixing your car, you're wearing tefillin, right?" It's a reframe. So, like along those same lines, I was just thinking as you're speaking that Rabbi Akiva says these two things. Which one is? Where's the center of gravity? Is the center of gravity on loving each other, loving other people the way you love yourself? Or is the center of gravity, take care of yourself, and when you can, love other people? So, of course, it's clear. I mean, it's a rhetorical question. Clearly, the center of gravity, the klal gadol, the overarching principle of Rabbi Akiva is you have to love people the way you love yourself. But he put a disclaimer. There's a very helpful disclaimer. The disclaimer is, you are human. You are a finite being with finite resources. You have to optimize your giving as a function of those finite resources. Right? In other words, of course, you have to love people. That's the main thing. But you want to optimize, and you said this earlier, I think it's very well said. You want to optimize your long-term giving. Life is not a sprint. Life is a what do they call it, an Ultraman, or not more than Iron Man, like the crazy one, right? Like
Iron Man marathon. Yeah.
More than Iron Man. It's like it's like 100 miles. I don't know. There's one that's like insane.
Depends how many reincarnations. Yes, it's a long one.
Long, right? So how do we optimize our giving for the long haul? So Rabbi Akiva says you got to keep your eye on the gas tank. Not because self-care, and it's not because self-indulgence per se. It's not like you said, like the proverbial bubble bath. And again, we're very pro bubble baths. But the way what is the barometer? What's the metric? What is the modality with which you can judge? When do you know if you're being self-indulgent, and when do you know if you're really taking care of yourself for a noble purpose? And I think the answer is that insofar as you're taking care of yourself, is serving that higher purpose, then you're not taking, you're giving. You're giving. Just like when a doctor goes to medical school, they could say, you know what, there's people out there, they're dying, and then you're gonna go, I'm gonna take an EMT course, I'm gonna be an EMT. No, nothing against EMTs, right? But of course, the reason you go to medical school is to be able to help people where an EMT no longer can, right? And so that's not, when you're taking, in principle, if your goal is to give, you're not taking. That's actually part of your giving. Part of your giving is your training, because you will only be able to give insofar as you receive. And I think that's the way the Torah beautifully phrases it. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's not a mitzvah per se to love yourself. We love ourselves, thank God, right? And we should, and we need to realize that if we don't, that we need to go back and we need to learn our love ourselves, because it's foundational. It's like the prereq. The loving yourself is the 001 course to the 100 course of Torah. You gotta love yourself before you come to Torah. Torah assumes you love yourself. It's okay, good. You love yourself, good. Now, here we go. You gotta love other people the way you love yourself, right? The loving yourself is the necessary prerequisite for you to then be able to go and love other people. So that's, I think, me starting just to thinking with you, thinking about how these two interplay.
I love it. And that's truth. Truth is your ability to take it. When I was in yeshiva years ago, when I first started out, I remember getting very saddened or down or depressed when I would mess up something. Like if I woke up too late for the Kriyat Shema in the morning. And I went to Rabbi Tauber, a rabbi of mine, and that he said Judaism it's your relationship. It's a relationship you're having with God. And a lot of people treat it like a fling. A Baal Tshuva, somebody who's new to it, is so excited and treats it like a romance. And romance is hot and heavy and exciting, but it can also fizzle out quickly. And he said, this is a marriage. You're committing to God and he's committing to you. This is something you're going to mean for life. So if you mess up here and there, it's not that you don't care, but it's that you recognize that you're in this for the long haul. And that really resonated with me. And I think it's exactly what you're saying about how we work with others. Think of your life as something where you're pushing yourself all the time, but you have an eye to the future, to how can I make this sustainable? I recently launched a coaching program that I do, and charging money for me was very challenging. I like to give. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy giving. It's not, but I live in a world. I live in a place, and a mentor of mine said something that startled me. He said, when I told him I don't really charge much, or I don't charge well, he said, you're selfish. I said, maybe you didn't hear me right. I'm giving it for free. I'm giving. What do you mean selfish? He said, you're selfish because soon, by you doing this, you're going to have to pay your bills. You're going to have to get a different 9 to 5, and you will not be able to help people anymore the way you want to. So by you being kind to people and giving for free, you are being selfish to the greater whole of what you can accomplish. If you make more of an income, you're able to grow your outreach further, and you're able to give other people scholarships. So this idea has been very difficult for me, and you're 100% on the money, which is at the end of the day, we're a soul, yes, but we're in a body, and we're in a world that has demands and it says many tried like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Today's day, many tried like Rashbi, the Gemara says, and failed. And they say that means is they try to be like him. They try to just sit, learn Torah all day, not work, not do anything. And when you're not on the Baal Shem Tov's level and all the tzaddikim we mentioned, if you try to live that way, which I tried for a while, especially in the Chabad movement, you have to be selfless. You sign up to go somewhere around the world to make a Passover Seder somewhere. You spend the entire Friday outside trying to find fellow Jews to give into our Torah to, and it can drain you. You have to know what you're capable of, like you said. And if you can find that equilibrium, you'll get a lot of joy. I would only put a disclaimer that Chassidut teaches that our animal soul is often stronger. And if we just try to balance it out, we will generally choose the lazier, self-serving side. Yeah. But to have that little bit of that flame under you that, I don't feel like giving. And you as a father can tell, and a husband can tell me more about this, but that kind of that mindset that I have to give, I have to take care of others, even when I don't feel like it, is also a reality.
Yeah. I think I'm glad you're bringing it to that, because I think to marriage and parenthood, because I think that's where you really feel how heavy this obligation is. When it's in the air, it's easy to talk about these ideas in the air, but as a son with parents, siblings, roommates struggle with this, right? Like you talk about, it's very interesting that there's a man I know. He actually inspired me very early on in my journey in Judaism. He wanted to. He was interested in resolving the conflict between Jews and Palestinians. He said this was very exciting to him. He started looking into it. And then you realize that Jews they actually struggle a lot between them. So he said, okay, we're going to resolve the problem between the religious and the secular in Israel. A great project, yeah. And then he's like, whoa. People are lacking basic day-to-day skills of getting along with one another, right? In other words, speak to any person who's married, and they'll tell you they've invested a lot. How much you have to invest to really listen to this person, to what their needs are, to the language, their language, to timing, to when you have to give them space, when they don't want space, they want you to approach them and talk to them. That's what the person you love the most, you most naturally love the most, at least. That's the person who you know the best. You live with them. You don't have to go anywhere to help them. They're right there, right? And if that's a struggle, so sometimes I feel like we're skipping steps. Like, I want to love the whole world. It's okay. Like, what does love look like? Well, have you heard of marriage? It's like, yeah, let's start there. And I think the Arizal himself also taught, in Rav Chaim Vital, his student, says that when we after 120, when we move into the world to come, they judge our love for other people through the prism of our love for our spouse. In other words, if we were very generous with people outside of our home, but weren't caring with the person who was right there in front of us, then it bespeaks of an insincerity in our giving. So I think that, in a certain sense, the idea of the home, the place where the starting point, that I think brings out this tension that, of course, we want to be idealists, but not at the cost of the realities that are staring us in the face.
So good, that idea of you want to love the whole world, but what about you? You know, the famous line, at first I wanted to change the world, then I wanted to change the city, then I realized maybe my own area, and realized my own household, and maybe myself. You know, start with yourself. I first of all want to acknowledge everybody that's been commenting on this and engaging with us. It feels like a group conversation or a group that energy. So I appreciate all. Sorry if we don't get to all the questions. The term for love in Hebrew is ahava, and ahava is from hav. Like we say on Friday night, havu l'Hashem b'nei. We say render, give. Giving to another creates a love for that person, and the focus, bringing up on relationships and how that's the first thing that we're talked about when we pass away or is looked at us. I heard somewhere that in the next world, we're asked to, how we judged others is how we are judged. My name, Daniel, Dan means to judge, God's judge, but the Kel, the end of the name is God's attribute of kindness. So hopefully it's something I need to work on is, to give the benefit of the doubt and to judge others in a better way is clearly something that matters a lot when it comes to the end of our lives. Were we somebody that was, I read recently in a book of Kabbalah, it says the highest thing you can do to grow spiritually is to be insulted and not respond. Is the ability to look at others in a soft way and not take affront to everything, but practically, and again, the disclaimer, there's a much broader conversation about, like, it doesn't mean taking abuse, and people you have to have a really healthy relationship with people. But I just think this focus that you and I probably both value a lot is that our whole lives is basically about character growth. How can we get better? To me, life is two things. It's how can I grow? How can I grow my character, let my soul influence my consciousness and become a better person throughout my life? And my impact on others. How do I make the world better? How do I make others around me better? And I think this mitzvah, or this concept of caring for others and giving them the benefit of the doubt, giving to them, which will, even if we don't like them, giving to them and helping them will actually somehow ironically create more of a care and love for us to others. The more we can do that, even when we don't always feel like it, God willing, that will lead us to feeling that for real and growing to the best version of ourselves. And just one cool thought I was thinking of was, I heard once in the Amidah prayer, the first paragraph we say, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So we mention all of them. But then we close off the paragraph, Baruch atah Hashem Magen Avram. Blessed are you, God, the shield of Abraham. Why Avram? What about the other two? So if you look at what they represent, Abraham represented love and kindness. Isaac was more, Yitzchak was more awe of God and fear of God. I don't like the term fear. It was more of like a reverence of God. And Yaakov, Jacob, was the idea of learning Torah. So when you look at history, when it comes to Yaakov and Jacob learning Torah, we learn a lot actually now. We have it on Instagram. Like, we're doing quite a good job as a people. However, the level, you look at who the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Akiva was, it blows my mind. I was just looking at Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan recently, but you look, the further back you go, the more unbelievable it was. So we've kind of gone down in terms of, you look at Isaac, Yitzchak, and you think of awe of God. I mean, we had prophets. We read about the Arizal, we read about people in the past. They had less distractions, so it was easier for them. But their awe of heaven was another level. I think we've gone down. But If you look at Abraham, you look at love for each other and kindness to each other, I think we're at the highest place we've ever been. We have our flaws and lack of unity, but you look at Chabad houses around the world, you look at Meor in Manhattan, you look at so many of us are trying to give and create homes for people and give to each other in a way that's unprecedented. And that's, I think, Magen Avraham. God said, you might lose out on those two, but I will make sure, and you will make sure that love of another is something that you will grow and grow throughout history. And I think we should commend ourselves for having such a discussion and having such a focus on how we can be outward focused and treat others well, and also have that self-care. Rav Jack, do you want to? I think Instagram gives us 5 more minutes, but we might have more. We might have more. We'll go till we can't, but I think we might have more than 5.
They give you a grace period of 5 minutes extra.
No, because I think we started. I think we started a bit late after 6, so that's why.
Oh, fine. Okay, great. Okay, good. So, yeah. So I'm so happy you finished that with that like vision pointing us to Magen Avraham, that God is the shield of Abraham, and ultimately that's the shield that we carry because we're descendants of Abraham, and we make ultimately love and care and elevating the people around us. That's our ultimate goal. I'm so happy that is the framework, right? And I don't what I'm about to say is not to the exclusion of that at all. Is just again just kind of adding this other layer that I think is so important for us in order to become givers. If you remember Rav Avad Yosef, the former chief rabbi of Israel, passed away 7 or 8 years ago. He used to walk around with really cool shades, and I my whole youth I just thought he was just a cool rabbi. Like I didn't know there was a backstory. Like what's the backstory with the rabbi with the shades and the turban? But it turns out there is a backstory. When he was a young boy, his family didn't have a lot of money, and but he loved learning, and he would learn deep into the night when it was dark. And what he would do is, he didn't want to. It was expensive, I guess. Candles, or electricity, whatever they were using, was expensive, and so he would actually sit by the window and use the street light a little bit of yellow street light coming in through his window. He would use that to learn, and his eyesight deteriorated, and like your mentor who told you that you were being selfish by giving something for free, someone told him later on that he was being selfish as well, because he was compromising his eyesight, which was so necessary for him as a Torah scholar, as a rabbi, as a teacher, right? And he would talk about that a lot. That was like his metaphor for this concept. I think the way where it kind of like comes to a head for me in day-to-day life is people ask us for favors all the time. And we do one of two things. We either say, sure, right? I'll be there, right? Knowing that we might not, or we say something like vague, like I'd love to be there because we want to people please, right? And then we can disappoint, right? We don't show up. We say, oh yeah, something came up, blah blah blah. Or we do the other thing. We want to protect ourselves. We say, I don't know. I have to look at my schedule. I don't know, right? Which is the opposite thing. Both of those seem like distortions. They seem like extreme positions. And neither of them feels good. That's for sure. Neither of them feels good. Mm-hmm. If we people please, we feel bad because we might flake on them. If we say no, we feel disconnected from people. So I think you said that a mature person learns how to give. I think it's 100% true. But I think a mature person also, a sign of maturity also is the ability to say, I would love to go. I just have to check to see if I can, right? Which is this like complex maneuver, which needs to be sincere. You really would love to go. Your love of people, your love is there. You want to, but you have to check with your resources. Time is a resource. Energy is a resource. You have other relationships, other obligations in your life, and that's because we're finite beings, right? We're finite beings. So we just have to check it. It doesn't compromise my love, and I think that's what will help us, God willing, become givers, sustainable givers who are able to give over the long haul, who are able to focus and give in a way that doesn't compromise ourselves as givers. So that's I'm just speaking it through one last time after our conversation, so we can take it home with myself. But it's been a fascinating conversation, Rabbi Daniel. Thank you so much for.
I've really enjoyed it too, and I think I might have skipped up. Going so lofty. One recipe to feeling that you want to give to others and be that person that's like helping is to be joyful, happy, to set simcha poretz getter, joy breaks through all barriers. You see somebody at a wedding dancing, at his son's wedding. If somebody asks him for charity at that moment, he'll give him. He's in a state of like, it's all good. So it's crucial to live a happy life, to live in a way that's nourishing yourself, to not be a slave, to like, yeah, find ways to be happy, to nourish yourself in a good way, a healthy way. And through doing that, you will want to, it'll overflow to those around you. And I think, what you're saying, having that balance, having that ability to know when and how much, and saying no. Saying no might be saying yes to other ways to give. And I've been trying to find that balance. It's a work in progress. But it's actually what you've been saying on all that is I think is crucial to this topic. And that self-love, that working on that self-love and that self-compassion, and working on what makes you happy and being joyful with a mindset that I'm then going to take this version of myself and bring it out to the world and help those around me, and not be deaf to the needs of those around me, I think is a perfect balance to healthy giving and sustained giving.
Amen. Amen. We should merit to continue growing, to accept upon ourselves, like we started with the Arizal's instruction every day. It's an everyday acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Today we got to grow. We got to become more givers, more mature givers, not people pleasers, but more mature givers who are aware of what we're able to give, and always to be able to dig deeper and give more. I just want to just say one last thing. It's not a concluding remark. It's just I had it in mind this whole time, but so it was everything we just spoke about should be in the merit of Chana Snitkovsky's father. This conversation, this beautiful conversation, which is so Lag BaOmer-esque, of two people trying to find a bigger truth by coming together, which is what we learned from the mistakes of Rabbi Akiva's students. This all came from Chana, and Chana's father right now is in the hospital. God willing, he's gonna be okay. He has an obstruction in his digestive tract. God willing, it should clear up in the merit of Chana doing this and doing everything she does so beautifully, bringing Jews together, giving Jews access to Torah. Her father should have a refuah shlema. So thank you, Chana, for organizing this.
That connecting of all the limbs of the vessel, that connecting should happen for him. Everything should flow well. And thank you for putting this together, Chana. And absolutely. And just when you said every morning we take upon ourselves to love another, at night at Kriyat Shema, there's a paragraph that says, I forgive. I forgive those that have wronged me in this life and in past lives, which I don't know how we can know if I really want to forgive that person who mugged me in the streets of Paris in 1864, but we forgive. And that cleansing every night of like wishing well upon others, it's like a really cool thing. Before you go to bed, you just mentally, you wish upon good upon yourself and upon others, and you forgive anyone who has wronged you, and you just cleanse yourself at night. And then the next morning, you take upon yourself to have love to others. And like you said, it's a daily practice. And Hashem should help us. And the merit of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we should all, love one another and take care of ourselves too.
Okay, thank you, Reb Daniel. Looking forward to doing this again. Thank you for all the insights.
Would love to. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. I'll read all that you wrote, and please feel free to reach out to either of us if you're ever in New York or California or just online. This will be live for the next 24 hours, guys. Happy Lag BaOmer. Bye, Alexa.